Hey everybody, welcome to W3 Online. We're so glad you joined us tonight. Hope you have a lot of fun. Hope your week is going really well as you're doing online school or however you're doing school right now. And I know a lot of things are different, a lot of things have changed, but we're going to continue doing this, so we're glad you joined us. Now, tonight in our Bible time, I want to catch us back up from where we were last week. You see, last week we ended with Joseph and his brothers finally meeting and Joseph letting them know who he was, that he was the brother that they had sold into slavery long ago. And of course, how the brothers were extremely frightened until he reassured them that he would not seek revenge on them, but instead that he was there to help take care of them. So the next thing that takes place as we continue our story is that Joseph sends the brothers back to Canaan to go get their father Jacob and bring him, the entire family, and all the livestock to Egypt. So the brothers go, and Joseph sends a bunch of wagons to go out and help bring everything back. When the brothers arrive, Jacob is quite surprised because now the brothers are saying, "Guess what, Dad? Joseph is alive. You know, the brother that we told you was dead? Well, he's really alive, and he is now the master of all of Egypt." Of course, Jacob was very skeptical at this. He wasn't sure if he should believe him or not until he realized that there were a bunch of wagons out there from Egypt that were there to bring him there. So this is what he does. He decides that maybe what the brothers are saying is true, and they load up everything they have, all the children, they grab all the livestock, everything that they needed, and moved to Egypt. When they arrived in Egypt, Joseph came to meet Jacob, his father, for the first time in many years. When they meet, it's exactly what you'd expect it to be. There were hugs, there was crying. It was just like a scene in a movie, all without the slow motion running towards one another. They met, they embraced, they cried, and they were reunited as a family again. 17 years Jacob lives in Egypt, living in the land of Goshen, one of the nicest areas of all of Egypt, where they could actually be shepherds and could take care of their flocks and all the things that they love to do and farm. 17 years passes and Jacob dies at a ripe old age of 147 years old. And when he dies, not only does his family mourn his death, but the entire nation of Egypt mourns the death of Joseph's father. They have a big ceremony where they bring all of the major officials and a lot of the army go with them all the way back to Canaan to bury Jacob in the cave where the rest of the family, his father, his grandfather, and all their wives and children were buried. Once they travel back, the brothers now begin to get very afraid because in their minds, the only thing keeping Joseph from seeking revenge against him was Jacob. And now that Jacob was gone, what was Joseph going to do? So they send a message to him saying, "Please don't kill us. Please don't seek out revenge on us. Instead, make us your slaves, and we'll do whatever you want us to do." So Joseph calls the brothers before him, and these are his words. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 19, it says, "But Joseph replied, 'Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought to me this position so that I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children.' So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them." Now here's the point. Joseph could have been mad. Joseph had every reason in the world to seek revenge, but instead what Joseph did is Joseph trusted God. And he trusted God, and he was faithful to God throughout his entire life. And you know what's really cool about the story? It's not even really about Joseph at all. Because so many times we make Joseph out to be the hero, when in fact, the hero of Genesis and the hero of Joseph's story and of Jacob's story and Isaac and Abraham is actually God. God is a hero of Genesis. And just as God is a hero of Genesis, he's a hero of your story and the hero of my story. We know that right now life is kind of weird. We don't even know when we get to leave our house, do we? But you know what? All God asks us to do is to be faithful and to trust him, because he's the hero of your story. And while you don't understand what is going on now, just like Joseph didn't when he was in prison, just like Joseph didn't when he was just a slave or a servant, we don't know what's going on. But just as Joseph trusted God, so can we. And we don't know what our story will end up like, just like Joseph didn't. But we can trust God to know that it will bring him glory and it will bring good for many. And that's the important thing. So here's the rest of the story. After many years, Joseph lives to the ripe old age of 110. He has many family who are there in Egypt, still in the land of Goshen, who he leaves behind. Jacob and all had a family of about 70 people in Egypt. And now Joseph leaves that same family there. But guess what? That's not the end of the story. Because you know what happens next? That family grows and grows and grows. But you know what? We're going to learn about that next year in W3 as we study the book of Exodus together. It's going to be a lot of fun as we learn about how this little family becomes a huge nation. So I hope you join us. Now, I've got a letter from Dr. Digalot that I want to read to you. It says, "Hello from Canteen, Ms. Carol, Ms. Becky, and Dr. Dig. I hope that your Easter was the best ever. You know, we all had to do a little changing around this year, but wasn't it fun to find ways to enjoy Easter? And doesn't it make you look forward to the times when we can all be back together? Most important, isn't it incredible that Jesus rose from the grave and is sitting right beside Father God right now? Don't we have the best thing ever to celebrate? It gives me joy, and I sure hope that it gives you, my nice pals, joy as well. Wow, he is risen just as he said." In one verse from Genesis 50, verse 24, Joseph, after his exciting, hard, obedient life, says, "I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Joseph remembered what God had promised his people in Genesis 15, and Joseph did his part to do God's work. Now he is pointing to the great things God has for people like Moses and the people who would leave Egypt one day. Boys and girls, that same God that Joseph trusted is our God, and you too can trust him and serve him like Joseph did. Go for it. Dr. Digalot. So I hope you liked getting to hear from Dr. Digalot. Now we've got a few things still in store for you because this isn't the end of things. I want you to keep watching this video because up next is World with Miss Julie. And then of course we've got a wacky game to end everything. But make sure you stick with us even after wacky game because we have some important news to tell you. We're glad you joined us. Keep watching.
Hey guys, it's me again with Michael. Hopefully there won't be any spitting involved this week. But I wanted to tell you guys a few more things about China. So last week we talked about lots of just kind of like random facts about China, like that they have lots of people in their country, that their government is really powerful and controls a lot of things that they do. And so today we're going to talk about Christians in China specifically. So Christians still, there's a lot of Christians in China, but it's not the majority of the Chinese people. So like most people in China aren't necessarily Christian. But China has as many as 1 million new believers every month. So the estimates are kind of hard to tell because there's no organization that can really go through and say, are you a Christian, are you a Christian, are you a Christian, right? So it's kind of an estimate. And the government doesn't really want to admit that there's as many Christians there as there are. But so the Christian church in China is growing very quickly, and it's continuing to grow a lot. So one of the problems that they face is not only does the government want them to not be growing, but also they don't have enough Bibles in China. China actually prints most of the world's Bibles, but they're mostly printed in other languages other than Chinese. And so the problem is that even though they have all these Bibles that are going out to all these different places, like I said, there's not very many in Chinese. So, and with as many as 1 million people becoming new believers in Christ every month, then that's a lot of Bibles that they don't have. And so one of the ways that we can pray for them is that they will be more Bibles in China. So some of the ways that the Chinese church is challenged is, I told you the government doesn't really like them as much, right? Because they feel threatened by them a little bit. And so in China, the government really keeps kind of tabs on what you're doing. And so they have this thing that's called a social credit score. And what that is basically for adults, China sort of keeps track of what you do online, the things that you post on social media, like on Facebook, the sorts of videos you look at on YouTube, the things that you search for to purchase on Amazon or things like that. Also, they keep track of where you go and what you do and who you hang out with. And so if you hang out with people that are known to be Christians, or you go to a church that is publicly, a church that has a sign out, right, saying it's a church, then your points go down. And so if you have a low score, then that makes it to where you can't buy an airplane ticket, buy a train ticket. You don't get as good at jobs. You don't, if you have a low score. So we know you're a Christian, you hang out with Christians, maybe you pastor a church or you serve in a church. You post or share things online about sermons or church ministries and things like that. Then your score goes low. The government can actually, because of the low score, they can kick you out of the house that you live in. They can fire you from your job. And for mommies and daddies, they can actually make it to where their kids can't go to as good a school. So that would be you guys not getting to go to a good school because your parents were Christians. Things like that. Another issue with Bibles in China is that because the government controls what we call censors the internet, so they only let certain things show up on the internet. So if you search on Amazon for a Bible, even though lots and lots of Bibles are made in China, it'll show up there's no results, there's no Bibles to purchase. And we know that there are, it's just that the government controls sort of what you can see on the internet. They also have access, the government keeps access to people's phones. So here in the US, if police want to pull up stuff from somebody's phone or whatever, look through their phone and see their photos or their videos, they have to go through this process and have a reason to need it, that they're investigating something, okay? In China, there's people that have taken videos of police coming in and coming in and stealing Bibles out of churches or things like that, or and so if they video that, they'll say, oh, I'm going to capture this, I'm going to share it online so the world can see what's going on. Well, then when they go to post that video, they realize that the video isn't on their phone. It's been deleted. And that's because the government has gone in and has access to their phones and has deleted it. That's kind of freaky, right? So that's an issue because they don't have a good way of saying this is what's going on, this is what's happening, if they can't share those pictures and videos and things like that. So in China, I know we've talked a lot about house churches, which are small groups of people that meet, usually anywhere from 5 to 30 people that meet maybe in a business or a home, things like that. And they just meet with those small groups and they study the Bible and they do church just in that small area. They don't have a big church building that they go to. Well, in China, they have that, do not play your dog guitar. in China they do that, but also they do have some churches that typically they have a smaller building, or they rent. Hold on just a second. We got a dog guitar going off. Okay, so leave that alone. So some churches do have their own spaces that they rent, kind of like we do in our church building. And those are known to be churches. So those are allowed to be there, but the government has done this new thing where they want to have video cameras in all the churches, so they know exactly what the pastors are preaching about and things like that, so that then if they're saying things that they don't like, then they can call them in to the police station and things like that. Another thing that the government does is, even though they do allow some of these churches to exist publicly, so like to be a known church, is that they'll come in every now and then and like do things to sort of stir up trouble, like tear the cross off the church or tear the sign down that says that they meet there. They may come in and take up all the Bibles and then take them out in the street and burn the Bibles and things like that. And then if you try to take a video, they'll push you aside, take your cell phone, all sorts of things like that. Then in house churches, what the government sometimes will say is that, like, oh, you're plotting to do something to overthrow the government, or anything. And they really don't even have to. They can just say stuff like that you're like, this is completely ridiculous. But you can't argue with it because they're the police and they're the government, and you can't control that. So some of the things that are going on with like the COVID-19 stuff is that the church in China is really they've really been really big in trying to spread the word about Jesus, but they're really working extra hard during what's going on with all the people getting sick. Now we know that China is not as bad there's not as many sick people there as there were before. But some of the things that Christians were doing in China was taking face masks that you might have seen some people wear. You might have parents or friends that may have worn one. But they were taking face masks and handing them out to people on the street and saying, this is free, this is free. And a lot of times it'd be in a plastic bag with like a little piece of paper in it, talking about what Christians believe and why, and things like that. So that gave them an extra opportunity to share the gospel with people. That's all I'm going to tell you guys about China. We will talk more about it next week. Bye, guys.
Hey guys, it is time for a wacky game. I'm really hoping that you still have some Easter eggs out in your Easter baskets. They can really come in handy and make this a lot of fun. If you don't have your Easter eggs out, just find maybe some small balls or something like that. I think you can make it work. You're gonna have a race, all right? And this is gonna be like the good old-fashioned egg in the spoon race, except, get over there, I'll give you the directions, Goose. All right, so you're gonna put it in, the egg in the spoon, and you're gonna race down, and we each have our own separate bucket, all right? Rules are you listening? If it falls off, you have to pick that egg up and go back and start over, all right? So you can do this a couple of ways. You can just see who gets the most down before you run out, or you can set a timer, like a minute, and just see who can get the most in a minute. But if you have little kids or younger children, you might just want to have them walk it down. But the older you get, let's make it a little bit harder and more fun. You can get a towel and lay out your towel. Parents, if you're really thinking this one through, you might want to put something on the towel on the floor. You can do a little bit of mopping it while you go, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to pick our egg up and we're going to drag and scoot down, all the way down, and go back. We didn't actually say go, we just started. We didn't put a time for either. How many are we gonna do? Who gets the 5 first? How many are we getting in there? Hey, all right, good job. You have a lot of choices, a lot of variety. Have fun.